This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Season is about to get started, so of course it's preview time, our favorite time of the year. As always, man, I love to roll out the red carpet. We got a special guest on board. This is going to be an exciting episode previewing the Eastern Conference. Let me go ahead and lend my services to the myth, the man, the legend, my man, Mr. Warrenshaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, my brother? Hey, man, Christmas is early for us, man. We get to start bringing the gift that keeps on giving for our listeners with the Eastern Conference preview.
Yeah, we're starting with the lesser, air quote, lesser of the two conferences. But
you've been saying that for 3 years coming now, bro.
Well, you know, it's all dependent on, again, perspective, right? But I think, you know, when we talk about the NBA just restarting, it gives us a lot of, you know, joy in that fulfillment. And we have an amazing guest to kind of help us break down the Eastern Conference, where I think while, you know, the going word is that it's the lesser of the two conferences, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. And as we get into our conversation, we'll see there's a lot of parity in the East as well, too, that I think is going to add to that excitement of having this conversation.
I'm excited because I finally want to see us get back to saying beasts of the East. I want to feel like we got enough drama and representation for this upcoming season for us to start using those monikers than the least of the East, you know? That's my sentiment. So anyway, our special guest probably needs no introduction. He has been a savant as far as covering the NBA. We are so excited to have him on board to help us preview the East. Our man, Dan Favale, is going to be joining us in a few moments. And listen, this is us breaking down. This is us giving perspective of what we think is going to happen for this year's season in the Eastern Conference. So you do not want to miss out on this. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at The Warren Shaw, or get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all major platforms. You can go to www.nbabaseline.com in order to check out not only us, but the episode of great content and shows that we've been delivering for you for so long. As always, when you catch us on the YouTube channel and you see the blue and white logo, you know that's the 19 Media Group family, 19 Media Group running these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check us and the great family of content creators that have been putting it on for your listening pleasure. Coming up, Sean and I get ready to break down the East with our special guest, Dan Favale. But first, it's Raycon's anniversary. And what better way to celebrate than a deal on the Everyday Earbuds Classic? They're now 20% off. So it's the perfect time to get your hands on these reliable, super comfy, and easy to take anywhere. And you'll see why they have been a fan favorite since day one. The Everyday Earbuds Classics are loaded with upgrades, active noise cancellation, multi-point connectivity, so you can pair with two devices at once, and an ergonomic fit that actually stays put no matter what you're doing. Plus, over 3 million customers already love Raycons, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee. So if you don't love them, returns are easy, so you have nothing to lose. The Baseline boys love their Raycons, and we think you will love them too. Go to buyraycon.com/baseline to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classics. That's buyraycon.com/baseline to get 20% off. Coming up, Shaw and I and our special guest, Dan Favale, break down the Eastern Conference. Don't miss it here on The Baseline. And we are back, Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to do our 2025-26 Eastern Conference preview with our special guest. He co-hosts Hardwood Knocks, his savant covering the NBA, especially with the Eastern Conference. Our man, Dan Favale. Dan, thanks for hopping on board with us, brother.
Oh, no problem. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, we are excited whenever we have an opportunity to chop it up with with our contemporaries regarding our interpretation and even your interpretation of how we think the Eastern Conference is going to play itself out. I was just talking about this with my man Shaw, because the running joke has been the East has been the least for the last few years, right? Like, people don't ever speak with confidence about whoever's coming out of the Eastern Conference in order to hoist the O'Brien Trophy. However, I believe that there may be, a changing of the guard a little bit I want to get back to us talking about the beasts of the East, because I really do think that there is a competitive spirit that is arising with the talent that is now in the Eastern Conference. And I think with the drama that happens through the course of the regular season, with everything playing itself out, it's an opportunity for the East to kind of re-represent itself so that we can put that B next to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I could get on board with there might be more confidence there this year for sure. I would worry about the top level of it, whereas we have the Knicks and the Cavs that people know about, and it's, if you look in the West, the Thunder exists, so this makes that's couched with everything. But it feels like there might just be more bona fide title threats in the West, like which team could go all the way and win it in the West. And I'll be interested to see what is the team in the East that could, or two that could emerge in the East that fits that bill that could then maybe tip the scales when you're looking at, like, again, the top level of these conferences in the East favor.
And I think the one thing, too, before we get into our discussions of it, I think, to me, how these teams perform through the course of the NBA season, I think will resonate with our confidence level. Because for some of those teams that are contenders, right, like we're going to talk about them in a few minutes, a lot of it is not so much what they do through the course of the regular season. They're pretty solid as long as they stay healthy. It's how they perform going into the postseason. It's that level of confidence and their ability to make adjustments. And I think what's going to really sharpen their tools is who they're dealing with when they get to the playoffs, right? And I think we saw a little bit of that last season in some of the matchups in the East. So we'll get into all of that. But again, no better person to help break it down than you, my man, Dan. So let's get right into it. We'll start from the bottom up, right? You know what I'm saying? The bottom up. We want to make sure we show some love to the teams that might not be in that play-in, play-off picture. However, we want to at least give a little credence to whether or not there is some upside to their future. And we'll talk about those lottery teams, right? So out of the consensus, we basically came down to the Charlotte Hornets, the Washington Wizards, and the Brooklyn Nets. And Dan, I want to start with you on this. You know, what are we actually saying of these teams? Who do you feel has more upside? Who do you feel like, man, there's still a lot of work left to do, or we have no clear cut idea what their future is even going to look like, even when we get to the end of this season of the lottery teams that we have basically selected?
Yeah, I think you kind of neatly put them into like three buckets within this tier, where it's the Nets. We just have no idea what they are, what they're going to be. We just know that they're not trying to win, and they've made that very clear. The Wizards, I think, have the highest long-term upside of this group. When you look at all the young talent they've assembled, the cap flexibility they have moving forward, they're another team that's clearly also not trying to win. And then the Hornets are just super interesting because you finally surround LaMelo Ball with shooting. They probably have the worst center rotation in the NBA, though, right now. And can LaMelo stay healthy? So how much does that shooting matter? They're the team that might have the most immediate upside of this group. But when we start to go through these other teams in the East and you look at the depth that they have, especially the proven depth, you start to wonder, okay, Charlotte, they might be a good team with their best lineups, but are they a squad that could kind of pull back as the season goes on and lean more into the future like we've seen them do basically each of the past two seasons nearing the trade deadline?
Yeah, one of my favorite teams, I think, in this tier is going to be my league pass darling, is going to be the Washington Wizards, right? I think just because they finally, for me, the level of competency, knowing that they needed to reset. We talked a lot about this over the course of the summer. So they were kind of played in the middle, weren't really sure what they wanted to do. And they still have some veterans that probably need to be extradited, I think, from this roster, maybe by season's end. And obviously, we talk about, Chris Middleton and CJ McCollum. But I think to get things going now, they've reset. And I'm really excited and bullish, if you will, on what Cam Whitmore might be able to do with all the reps and all the touches that he's going to get out here in Washington. So of the three, I'm most excited about them. But I agree with Dan in terms of Charlotte, because they want to be competent, but it starts and ends with, LaMelo being able to stay on the floor. It's like there's just nothing else even matters if he's not on the floor. This team cannot really perform at the level that they hope to do. So I'm interested to see if Charlotte at some point gets frustrated, or if he goes down with another injury, then do they decide, maybe this is not the guy? Because his name was in trade rumors, but a lot of people thought he should be considered to be traded. And that didn't actually come to fruition. And maybe his value is too low right now. But those are the two teams that I have at least the most amount of interest in. Brooklyn, as I've said many times, it's going to be the Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas show. God bless, all the reps and the rims that are going to have to absorb those shots from those two gentlemen.
Do we make of anything with this combination of of Porter and Cam Thomas, because clearly there are two different motivations here of what success might look like for both of these guys, right? Like, one clearly is saying, I want people to buy into the fact that I'm a legitimate scorer in this NBA, right? Regardless if I'm on a good team or a bad team. And one guy is like, I don't want people making it seem like I'm riding off the coattails. I thought that I contributed a lot to the Denver Nuggets winning an NBA championship. And as much as I felt like I got held back playing under Malone, here's an opportunity for me to play on a team, albeit bad, but here's an opportunity for me to play in a team and even playing a division where I'm going to get the spotlight put on me if I actually start shaking and baking cats, you know what I'm saying, on a night in, night out basis, and prove my worth as being a high potent scorer, you know, in the league. Are we intrigued by that? I want to get your thoughts, Warren, and then Dan jump in real quick on that.
Well, you know, one of the things I saw, I think it was another podcast that actually put it out there, was like, how did the Nuggets keep Michael Porter Jr. like tame all these years? Because he's had a very wild and robust summer. Like, it's been like, yo, who is this guy? So him now going into Brooklyn, I think with all the reps that he's going to get, yeah, I don't know that he's proving something. I think it's an interesting way to phrase it, right? I think he's always felt he is whoever, you know, who he thinks he is, really, in terms of being like this high level scorer. And I think he almost feels like it's going to be his right. Not even that he needs to prove it, but it's his right, in essence, to kind of command this team. And I'd be interested to see what Cam Thomas has to say about that, especially after accepting a qualifying offer that he feels disrespected by. And both of these guys, air quote, trying to prove their proverbial worth. I just don't know how that's going to lead to in terms of wins and or the team chemistry that you would hope a young team in Brooklyn is trying to ultimately build. I'll throw it over to Dan. Your thoughts on kind of the MPJ situation in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think I'd be more worried about him than Cam Thomas, just because for all that Cam Thomas is not, he has shown that he can generate offense out of nothing. That has never been a Michael Porter Jr. strong suit. And so it might be cool to see him have more on-ball touches, but is he someone, and I'm not saying Cam Thomas is, he's not elevating the play of guys around him. He's still trying to figure out, like, can he generate his own shot on a consistent basis? And I think the other variable here is they drafted like 5 guys who want the ball in their hands too. Sure. And like most notably Yegor Demin and Nolan Traore. I think those are guys they're going to want to play a bunch. And so I'm also curious to see, specifically with Michael Porter Jr., because he has another year left on his deal, but we also know the Nets aren't married to him long term. If he's not fitting Jordi Fernandez's ethos on the offensive end, it really wouldn't shock me if this is someone that just gets shut down with some mysterious injury by like December, January, or February. So the same thing could happen to Cam Thomas, but again, you need someone on this team who can generate offense for themselves. We at least know Cam Thomas can do that. MPJ is yet to prove it.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, and our special guest, Dan Favale from Hardwood Knocks, joining us as we're continuing our coverage, discussing the Eastern Conference and doing a preview. All right, so let's switch gears, right? And again, this has been great because now it kind of leads us into who we think is play-in worthy, right? Like, we understand the scope of that. They're not lottery bound, but they're not quite just ahead of the guys that we think are for certain going to be within the playoff picture, right? So these are considered our play-in worthy teams. And we basically have it locked down to 2 teams. And I think, Dan, maybe you have one additional team that's on the cusp, and I'll let you speak to that in a moment. But we've got the Chicago Bulls and we've got the Toronto Raptors. I'm going to start with you on this one, Shaw. What are we making of both the Bulls and the Raptors? Hey, the Bulls, they were in the dance, right? They put themselves in the dance, and year in and year out, you look at this roster and you keep saying to yourself, how is it even conceivable that they are even in these kind of conversations? You would have thought by now somebody put the Bull down, so to speak, and made them at some point a lottery bound team. They just refuse to be that kind of team, and I admire them for it. But again, are we talking about them being so good? Or them just now finally, this is the downward trend that we're going to finally see with regards to the ensemble of talent, given what they've done over the last year and a half, which is basically give away all of their main players, right, to other teams. But we still don't know for certain where this team kind of looks collectively under Donovan.
Yeah, I think for me, Chicago, and I said this on another show, ironically, I was like, they take their annual, Mecca trip to the play-in. Like, this is this is where they live. They are play-in darlings every single year, just right above, that 9-10 range, and just won't kind of go away. They waited too long to trade everybody, as we know, in terms of the main guys where they could have got more value. Now, it's Kobe White and Josh Giddey and Vucevic still there, but the main guy who they need to be developing in there is obviously Bruce Ellis. That, I think, is the point here. I don't love adding Okoro to, Patrick Williams and all that. Like, good luck with that. But I think Bruce Ellis is a guy who they're going to be trying to obviously feature a little bit more here in this situation. But it's the same old thing for me with Chicago. I have them here in the play-in because they're still decent enough in essence to scratch out, maybe 34-ish wins, 35 wins, whatever it is, and be right in that play-in situation, but not bad enough where they needed to bottom out. And I think that's ultimately we'll need to see back is where they go. If they move off of Kobe White at some point, move off of Vucevic at some point as well too, and then let it be the Giddey and Bucelis show, I think that'd be better served. But to me, this is just kind of like what they always do. Dan, your thoughts? Chicago back here in the play-in range.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. This is where they live. They're aiming for 35 to 39 wins and to get that extra game or two of gate revenue in the play-in tournament. And I think what you mentioned is so interesting because you're right. They probably should trade Kobe White. He's in the last year of his deal. They just paid Josh Giddey. Like, what does a backcourt look like built around the future of Kobe White and Josh Giddey defensively? Probably nothing sustainable. But we know this organization doesn't think with that kind of forethought. And they're going, even if it looks like they can skid out and maybe improve their lottery odds, they're not going to do that. Like, they're just going to aim for the play-in. And so like that tournament was created specifically for the Bulls at this point, I think. I don't think there's really any argument there.
It's interesting because what I'd said a little bit earlier, Dan, is that you kind of have another additional team that would probably be more play-in worthy for you. I think you had like the Boston Celtics. And I wanted to ask you this question because it's very different, right? The Celtics, it's more of the extreme of injuries, right? Like, because there's nobody questioning if their talent is completely healthy. We aren't talking about it in that context, but until we know the status of Tatum and Brown, we're really not, to you don't feel as confident that they're going to be a middle of the pack team. They're probably going to struggle their way in. Maybe by the grace of the basketball gods, they get Tatum at a certain point if they think it's worth doing it. But when we're talking about the Bulls, we're talking about talent, right? Like, for all of it, it's never been about whether or not, an injury here or there. It's really the collective talent and the mindset of this team being better than what they actually can be, can they reflect? And I just find it interesting where you see the two differences on, just getting your take on that, because I feel like that's what we're going to be talking about as well, too, with the Toronto Raptors. It's never a question of an injury to their star player. It's always a matter of the talent just not living up to the billing to get themselves in a position where we buy into them being more than just either a play-in worthy team or a team that's on the cusp of hanging around the lottery teams.
Yeah, I think, the difference with Chicago is there's definitely it's the talent thing. And it's also just like they don't have the direction is because like you might have high-end young talent on this roster. I even really like Noah Sengai, who they drafted this year. But like, how much are you going to play him? Are you going to have the ball a lot in Buzelis' hands? Or are you have to give a ton of touches to Kobe White? Ayo Dosunmu was still here. You guys already mentioned that Vooch is still there. With the Celtics, to me, it's not even about the injuries for them. It's just, I don't think that they're going to want to be here. I think that they view this as an opportunity to kind of give Jaylen Brown and Derek White some breathing, like to catch a breather this year. Let Jason Tatum come back healthy. Maybe he plays towards the end of the year for a few games to get his bearings, but I don't think they're going to be chasing a play-in spot. I view it as more of just this intentional gap year when you look at all the talent they've traded away. And I mean, you mentioned the Raptors. I really can't quit the Raptors. They have a lot of talent on this roster.
Yeah.
They're a little Bullsian because like the talent hasn't come together yet, but we also just haven't seen enough of it. When you look at like the core lineup together, where it's like we want to see more of Quickly and Barnes, and like Brandon Ingram hasn't even played for this team. I still don't understand the theory of Toronto other than they have a bunch of talent and they think that it will coalesce together. But I keep just looking at, there are a lot of guys that want the ball. Jakob Poeltl's not the center to me for that group. Very smart player, can be a very effective player, but doesn't space the floor. His rim protection numbers have dropped. Is a good screener, a pretty good passer. But when you have RJ Barrett and Barnes, who both have questionable jump shots still on the court, and then also have Emmanuel Quickley and Brandon Ingram, who sometimes he's a high-volume three-point guy, sometimes he's not. There's a lot of variables at play, but I really look at them on paper, even down to some of like their younger, lesser-known guys like a Grady Dick, Jamal Shed. I really like him too, what he could do defensively. And Colin Murray-Boyles, excellent defensively, can't do a thing on offense. I don't understand this team. It just has a lot of talent, so I can't quit them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have to agree so much with that. There's a lot of guys and guys in Toronto. But yeah, it just doesn't all fit. I'm interested to see if Pirtle can be, as Dan was alluding to, again, the high volume screener and then a decent passer while they don't have the requisite spacing. Does that allow Grady Dick that he take another step? Presumably coming up the bench here, but will he become a guy who can space the floor for them, in some different alternate lineups? But they haven't got a lot of reps together, as Dan alluded to, which is a very, very interesting situation. They let Masai draft, and then subsequently, like, he exits right after the draft, which is another whole situation. But I'm not really sure what Scotty Barnes' long-term perspective is. Like, again, a good player, fringe all-star, but is he your building block? And who is the building block? And is BI going to come back here now and want to have all these touches to kind of show, hey, I'm that dude, or whatever the case to be? Like, I don't know. I feel like they're going to fumble their way to some wins and then obviously fumble their way to a lot of losses as well, which seems playing worthy to me. I can't put them anywhere else right now, but I'm rooting for them because I like a lot of their guys. I just don't know if I like them together.
Yeah, these two teams are going to be the most interesting to watch through the course of the year because their ceiling and their bottoming out are so extreme, are so extreme. I think if you're someone who's really trying to follow the ebbs and flows of an NBA season like a roller coaster, watch these two teams and how they operate, because you'll probably, the only thing that I think will be very much steady for both of these teams is literally the head coach's facial expressions, watching how these guys perform. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, and our special guest, Dan Favale of Hardwood Knocks, joining us. Coming up, we got the middle of the pack teams to go through, and you do not want to miss out who we have etched in as our contenders, quote unquote. I want to say it. I really want to say it. The beasts of the East. We'll get into those. Don't miss it here on The Baseline.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with Exquisite Travel and Tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We're back. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, our 2025-26 Eastern Conference preview with our special guest, Dan Favale of Hardwood Knocks, joining us here. Time for us to get into the middle of the pack teams. These are the teams that are definitely going to be in the playoff conversation. We're not ranking these teams. We're just basically looking at the teams collectively that we believe are best suited to be within the playoffs. And hey, when they roll the dice, who knows where they might wind up by season's end. We've got the Celtics, we've got the Philadelphia 76ers, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, and the Indiana Pacers. Now, Dan, you made a great argument about how, basically you were providing us with a prospectus of what the highs and lows, as I'm referencing Spike Lee and Denzel Washington, of the Boston Celtics and where their season may fold. And it's interesting how we were talking about how we don't know whether or not we want to luck up the Toronto Raptors or luck them down. I feel like this is what we're going to do with the Boston Celtics. They may actually intentionally try to lose games and still luck themselves into somehow being a team that's in the middle of the pack, that's like being in the playoffs, right? So we're not going to Cancun them just yet. But then we can also make the same argument for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Indiana Pacers. What do you make of, specifically those two teams? Which of those two teams you see has more upside? And which do you feel like this is a proving ground season when I look at both of those teams? We'll get into the Bucks and the Heat because I have a different perspective on them in a moment. But I wanted to get your take about where we see the 76ers and the Indiana Pacers, given the outlook of where these teams need to be and want to be by season's end.
Yeah, I think you have to say the Sixers have more upside because if you get 50 to 60 games of Joel Embiid, you have an MVP candidate. And we know that I love Pascal Siakam, but with Tyrese Halliburton out, you don't have that player in Indiana. And he is so core to that identity to where you have to wonder, is their offense going to look the same without him? But when you're going from sort of that baseline, just to, name check the podcast, I think Indiana has the higher just like floor because they have so much talent, they have so much depth. And I think with the Sixers, they still don't really know how they're supposed to play without Joel Embiid. And then you bake in just the questions about, can Jared McCain stay healthy? He was already injured again heading into year 2. What does Paul George look like because he's getting older and always feels like he's dealing with an injury? What does the backup big rotation look like? Are they really going to play a Dembona a bunch? Are they going to lean on Andre Drummond? So they have Dominic Barlow over there. They just have so many questions that the variance to their performance, I think, is a lot worse than in Indiana. And I know some have the Pacers, kind of like I mentioned with the Celtics. They see the Pacers got their pick back this year. They think they might be a team that pivots out of wins. That franchise just doesn't do that. And they're so deep.
Exactly. Not when you have a coach like Carlisle. He just works with whomever. And I saw more upside. I saw more flourish, Dan, to your point, from guys in critical games in the playoffs that got them to that game 7, that they're healthy. They're fine. This is their coming out party. The Nemharts, the Shepherds. We don't like the only wild card, in my opinion, is Mathurin. But if I get a gritty, pesky, Lance Stevenson like Mathurin, maybe that takes the burden off of this dependency that the Pacers may need to have on Siakam, because Siakam is going to be really your in and out mismatch every single night. If he plays within himself, he's capable of. He just doesn't have that aggression, that Halliburton sort of that mentality. So it'll be interesting to see, to your point, what you can see with the Pacers if they all play within themselves. And I think Carlisle can guide them in that. The 76ers, to your point, man, they frustrate me so much. And I really believe them losing Yabusele this season, I think is going to be, listen, Sixers fans loved Yabusele. He to me was, if you're going to lose out, I don't think they like this idea of the inconsistency of Embiid and his mentality and his approach on a night-in-night basis. You got that with at least Yabusele. I'm not making comparisons between the two, but I'm saying how he approaches the game, that hunger, that desire. Philly fans love that. You take players like that away, and the onus goes right back on their star players. Like, why are we paying dude this much money for him to basically go out and complain and not give us his all, even if he's injured, or then complain that he doesn't perform well because of the injury? So that's the one thing that I'm looking at, is how much scrutiny are the 76ers willing to take this upcoming season? Because talent-wise, they should be better than the Pacers, but when they don't perform at 100% on a night-in, night-out basis, that's when the scrutiny becomes big and the spotlight shines brightest on them.
Yeah, the Sixers are the constant great unknown in the Eastern Conference, and you just can't trust it. It's similar, not the same, but similar to the Clippers on the West. It's like, hey, you look at them, you're like, you want to believe, and then something always kind of goes awry. And I think that's a level of frustration that Sixers fans are probably dealing with more than obviously media types kind of like ourselves. It's just like, hey, well, whatever happens there, happens there. And it is really unfortunate that McCain is going to start the season, with on the shelf here with that thumb injury. Really looking forward to what he and Maxey can do in that backcourt too. But then Embiid, the limited time, the whole thing, it's a very, very, stressful situation for me to watch the Philadelphia 76ers. So I choose not to. But I think, when it comes to Indiana, really interesting too, Nemhard and Mathurin, all guys who are in the runnings, I think are ready for most improved players because they're going to get so many more minutes and reps. Like, they have all the opportunity. While I don't know if they actually be most improved, they'll have the most improved opportunities, and that's fine as well too. But Carlisle is a legendary coach who's always going to do what it takes to make his team competitive, and the Pacers like being doubted. So I think middle of the pack seems about right for them here too. But as we talk about some of the other tiers or other teams, within this tier, we kind of touched on the Celtics already. And as I go over to Miami a little bit, it's really interesting to me because this team, outside of Bam, Hero's going to start the season with an injury as well too. But they have a lot of guys who kind of do similar things and don't all like rise above the other. That could be good and bad, I guess, right? Like it's supposed to, like, you'd never really drop off, I guess, you're putting kind of like the same talent out there. And this is the type of roster that I think Spo really does usually work well with, lower expectations. But I think this is still a team that's going to find a way to get into the middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference. I think there was some variance in where we had them. Some of us hadn't been playing or whatever. But ultimately, I think this is a team that's going to be right there fighting. Dan, your thoughts on Miami, I think specifically, and where they should stack up here in the East?
I think you said it perfectly with the Spo element. It's like this roster is just made for him. Like you've taken the stars that have a ton of egos out of the equation, and Jimmy Butler, who is so critical to them, fantastic player, but towards the end it was not a good fit for anybody. And you saw that we all witnessed and saw what happened. Now you look at this roster, it's deep. It has a lot of question marks, but I think you can already see Nikola Jovic is playing differently. Them going out and signing Drew Smith, who returns to the court 10 months after suffering a torn Achilles because he's a superhuman, apparently. Having a guy like him or a guy like Keyshawn Johnson, just these potentially hidden gems where none of them are going to be stars. But if Jaime Jaquez Jr. doesn't perform better after having a down sophomore year, there is sort of a next guy up mentality there. And I think what's interesting about them is based off what we've heard in training camp, what little we've seen in the preseason, they're really going to lean into some spacey lineups. They're going to try and play faster. We'll see if Tyler Hero can be integrated into that upon return. But you have, just between Hero and Norman Powell, two of the better perimeter scoring guards in the league who don't always need the ball to be a threat. And that's what makes them so interesting to me is there's this sneaky depth to the way they can play. And I think you just trust any team that has Bam and Spo, they're going to figure it out defensively. Like I think they're going to cater to a lot of offensive lineups. We'll see a lot of Hero and Powell together who are not good defenders, but they just seem to figure things out defensively almost regardless of who they have on the floor. So, and Davion Mitchell made a little bit of a leap with them. So they just have, Warren kind of said this, they have a lot of guys. And so I don't know where they're going to land. Are they a top 6 team or do they get into the playoffs by the way of the play-in? That I'm still not sure about, but they certainly seem like a team that is going to be in the mix if they remain relatively healthy.
The Miami Heat team, to me, whatever numbers that you saw the Miami Heat give you last year, is throw that out the window. Because this team is probably going to operate a little bit differently. And Dan, it's interesting because Sean and I just talked about this. He just finished, attending Miami Heat Media Day. And given what he described to me as the tenor and the tone and how Eric Spoelstra sounded, I said, this is probably, we're getting to that point now where we're going to be talking about Eric Spoelstra the same way that we talked about with Greg Popovich when he made the adjustments, when he finally kind of changed a little bit of his mentality about how he wanted to see the team operate with the players that he had, rather than it just being baked into the culture that was established between him and Pat Riley. This could be that turning point season, just because it's been stripped down to essentially the bare minimum of what he needs in order to rebuild up the image of how this team wants to operate. And so it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to this because I've often had questioned over the last few years where the imprint is. Is it really Spoelstra's team? Is this Butler's team? Is this Riley's team? And I'm glad it all came to a head because I've always often felt that the Miami Heat thrives when Spoelstra has 2 or 3 guys that are molded within his philosophy and self. And then if you go out in free agency, you're not clamoring for the ego guy to help get you over the top. You're getting that guy that he knows is going to come in and falls right in with what I'm trying to do. You know what I'm saying? Like when you go and you get a Shaq, but you've got a D-Wade, right? It's like that fit, that helped because you had the culture guy, but you had the guy that came in knowing what his role was and what he was going to do. He wasn't going to overbear. The Heat have missed on that the last couple of seasons when they've gone out there to try to get someone free agency wise. I think if you're confident in Bam being that guy, and you're building up the Heroes, you're building up the Mitchells, you're building up the Vasquezes, all those guys within this season, then you probably have a better picture about how Spoelstra really has evolved as a coach rather than always questioning it about the Heat culture altogether collectively.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally, sorry, I was just going to say, I totally agree with everything you said there. So that's what I think makes this team so fascinating is not just what's going to happen this season, but how does it inform how they build this team for the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Spo is like this humbler of egos, and that's something too. Like Dan, you think we're on this on the last show, but I was like, listen, there's almost like a shared trauma between Vasquez and Jovic and Khalil Ware of guys who felt like, what, hey, I'm hot shit, and Spo was like, nah, bro, go ahead and grab some of this bench, and I'll tap you when I need you. And all of those guys need to kind of reassess how they're going to interact this year. Terry Rozier is part of that collective as well. So I'm really interested to see how Miami does that. Before we move on, though, we obviously need to, kind of touch on the Milwaukee Bucks. And, one of the things here, I think from us or from my lens is what level of ceiling raiser is Giannis with this roster, with Doc Rivers at the air quote helm? I think I had him in the middle of the pack. Some people had him in the play-in. I'm not really sure. Like how good is Milwaukee? And if he needs to play Giannis, that is play like 38 to 42 minutes a night, is that sustainable for them to be a middle of the pack team? I'll kick to you, Dan. Your quick thoughts when you were ranking Milwaukee. How did you assess them?
There is an element of, for me, through all things Giannis were possible, and the point Giannis reps that we saw in the towards the end of last year, they were encouraging, but I can't get fully on board with a team that is going to have either Kyle Kuzma, Kevin Porter Jr., or Miles Turner as its number 2 offensive option. I think that's setting the Bucks up potentially for offensive disaster because Giannis is going to need enough space or at least a second viable threat around him if he's going to have the ball in his hands. I think you could argue like the best shooters on this team. Okay, AJ Green, really good. You space the floor with Bobby Portis and Miles Turner. Some of the wing minutes are going to get dicey. And I would go back to Kyle Kuzma there. Like how long of a runway is Doc Rivers going to give him if he's actively damaging the offense like we saw him do at points last season? So you have one of the 3 to 5 best players in the NBA who happens to play both sides of the ball. I know people think that he's dropped off defensively, but Giannis is still just one of the best defenders in the league. If he remains healthy, I think that they'll be in the mix for a playoff spot. But how much are they going to need to rely on him? Are there going to be any easy games, or is this going to be circa like, we saw it with like those Knicks teams before they got Brunson, where it's like, okay, that was cool with Julius Randle, but look at how hard they needed to go every night just to be considered a fringe playoff team. And that kind of feels like the territory we're in with the Bucks and Giannis, is that if he's playing anything short of like 37 minutes a game, I think you could argue like, oh, maybe this team just belongs in the play-in, because I don't know that you can afford to operate like 12 minutes, 13 minutes a game without Giannis on the court. Like that seems, just even saying that right now seems super dire.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It gives me the EBGBs, honestly. I don't want my offense running through, Bobby Porter as well. I think, serviceable player. I can't do it. And then I'm really concerned about what pressure Miles Turner is going to face this year, in the kind of the wake of the Dame situation. So whatever it is, like the $50+ million it is to have Miles Turner, when you stretch and waive Dame and then add Turner salary into that, I'm just not really sure. And again, Giannis got to play so many minutes. It can't be Kevin Porter Jr. and Cole Anthony. Those guys are not, these great ball creators and distributors. While they'll be happy to take some shots, and sometimes they'll go in. I just don't know if Milwaukee is really set for that. So the more we talk about it, I'm more bullish on them in terms of playing, because Giannis also usually has some sort of a nagging injury where he can't play 70 games a year. So then you take that into consideration with the minutes load that's going to be a part of it too, and it gives me a little bit more doubt on Milwaukee. CL, before we close out here on the middle pack, any quick thoughts on the Bucks from you?
Yeah. I said that this was going to be my down year on the Bucks. I wanted to give the Bucks as much leeway as possible, and everything that they've done leading up, everything they've done past Drew Holiday, to me has been an ultimate miss. Where I think this becomes a miss is that you're going to spend this kind of money, and no disrespect to Doc Rivers, I will always give Doc Rivers his flowers, for being a really good head coach. But year in and year out, he continually keeps proving to me why. Listen, man, it's great to probably be in the booth and commenting than being out there, coaching, because there comes a point where when you're a placeholder for the players rather than actually being a guide or being, something substantive for the players and how they need to take that next step to be championship level. What exactly is Doc Rivers giving Giannis that Giannis hasn't already achieved doing what he did for the Milwaukee Bucks, getting them their championship, right? And so now it comes down to the other players, the Kyle Kuzmas, maybe even the Miles Turner. He doesn't have a championship. You know what I'm saying? Like there are guys that you would think Doc Rivers could actually help influence and be better at what they're doing, because if you send them somewhere else, they're probably not going to be starting or probably not going to be playing. So that to me becomes an indictment on Doc Rivers. And I feel like until that narrative changes a little bit, I'm almost on that Cowspiracy theory where you brought Miles Turner in because I'm guaranteeing you that Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to be yelling off to the rooftops, time to move me. It's time to go. time to make something happen, and they want to save face when that actually does have to happen, that they've still got some kind of a star player that can put fans in the seats. I'm not saying that Miles Turner is a Giannis. I'm just saying you got at least a legitimate player that is, comparable for whatever is going to happen in the aftermath of Giannis. But I don't see him being on this roster much longer if this team doesn't perform, at least like they're going to compete. And Giannis, he ain't having it. And I just feel like at the expense of a coach who I just think is past his days of being a solid coach, this is just not a good combination for me. And I'd have probably been more so about seeing them, to your point, Shaw, as a playing team more so than a middle of the pack team. But I feel like just because they have enough good players, they'll be hanging around in that conversation.
That shows how much respect we have for Giannis and his individual game, right? I think really and truly. Editorial note, Kuzma is a bubble champion, so he is an NBA champion. So, he does have championship experience. But outside of that, I see where you're going.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Ward, Sean, our special guest, Dan Favale of Hardwood Knocks. Coming up, it's time to break down those contenders. These are the elites of the East. We'll break down those teams that we believe are going to be in that conversation for the Eastern Conference Finals and possibly the NBA Finals. You don't want to miss it here on the Baseline. And we are back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest, Dan Favale of Hardwood Knocks, as we're doing our 2025-26 NBA Eastern Conference preview, rounding it out, and time for us to get into the elites of the East. These are going to be our contenders, the selections that we believe are going to be of the top teams representing the Eastern Conference with an opportunity to get to the NBA Finals. We've got the New York Knicks, Cleveland Cavaliers, Detroit Pistons, Atlanta Hawks, and Orlando Magic. Shaw, I'm going to start with you on this. These are the teams that we believe, especially from last year, maybe the last couple of years, that they are going to rightfully solidify the top 5 teams as the top 5 teams of the East. Clearly, teams like the Hawks, Pistons, and Magic are going to be jockeying for that position. I think collectively we believe that the Knicks and the Cavaliers should be one of the best teams, the top 2 teams. But what do we make of this, as our elites of the East?
Well, I'm actually going to kind of throw it back to you in a brief second, because it was your ranking who elevated the Pistons into this tier. We had this middle of the pack, but your evaluation kind of elevated them. So I had to go with the aggregate. It's like, all right, well, they can be Eastern Conference contenders. So I don't know if Dan and I will quite agree with that, but give you the opportunity to make your case for the Detroit Pistons. Dan also, CL is I want to say he's a Pistons fan, but he's always advocating them like year in, year out. So I'm anxious for him to kind of plead his case here. But I think, we're looking at the contenders. It's obvious New York and Cleveland should be at the top of this list. Everybody else is like, all right, did they make enough moves and headways to try to get in here? Atlanta, I'm really high on. I love what their general management did, in offseason, getting Porzingis, making that, whatever, that deal that came to them through New Orleans as well, to just everything, getting Jalen Johnson back. Like, this is a team that I think is poised as long as Trae Young can kind of keep his head on straight and not maybe salivate himself with, just like, oh my God, I need to not go here and out overprove himself. Just let that team kind of do what it needs to do. Then obviously the addition of Desmond Bane in Orlando as well too. So those are my quick overview thoughts. But Dan, before we kick it to you and kick it back to CL, why are you as high as you are on the Detroit Pistons?
Because I think the Detroit Pistons have figured out that they belong. I think having JB Bickerstaff as their head coach has been obviously very helpful. I think we're now beginning to see and believe in the young core talent that the Pistons have with Cunningham, with Duran, and with Oswar Thompson, who I don't even believe has been given enough, a runway for us to really see what he can bring to the table. But what's definite is that he has had opportunities and he has made the most of them. And I really do think that he's going to be a key piece as far as us really buying into the young talent that's there. The one thing that I think just really stands out to me is, one, this team clearly can play defense. Okay. I think that they have the capabilities of being a much better team defensively. I think there is room for them to be better offensively. And I think that's where JB Bickerstaff has to lean in, figuring out ways to get those young players to thrive so that the onus isn't on Cade Cunningham. Now you got like, the lightning in a bottle with Beasley's season that you got. And I think he can kind of continue to, but I don't think that solely is going to be the reason why I think they're going to be a much improved team. And
you can't see that he's not there.
So well, I know that, but I'm just saying that like that is because of the fact that, him as a shooter, right? There were those opportunities. He wanted to shoot. Now I think that's opening up the opportunities for everyone else to step in. And I think we'll kind of pick up the slack or make up the slack. I think the key here is competitiveness. And the other thing as well, too, and I spoke about this when I was watching the Pistons in the offseason. Again, the shot at JB Bickerstaff is that he sometimes shoots himself in the foot because he doesn't make in-game adjustments, or he doesn't make adjustments during those critical games like in the playoffs, because ultimately you could have made the argument that the Pistons could have beaten the New York Knicks in that series, right? So a couple of moves here and there. Are we talking about things differently? Would you be speaking in a little bit more confidence about the Detroit Pistons? I think, in my opinion, it's just me. I'm not convincing you. You're much higher on the upside of those other teams, but I'm not going to diminish the fact that the Detroit Pistons can run with the likes of the Orlando Magic and run with the likes of the Atlanta Hawks, because I believe in the fact that they now know that they belong there. I would have said something differently had this team, again, been an under 500 team, but they are figuring out to win basketball games. And when you have that kind of upside and the kind of improvement that I think you will see from Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren hasn't even come into his own. I think he believes that he could be among one of the better big men in the Eastern Conference. There's opportunity there for this team to really be a problem. And they're going to get it every single time because they're going to continually have to keep playing the likes of the Bucks, and they're going to continually play the likes against the Pacers and play against the likes of the I say the Bucks. I said the Pacers.
Central Division.
The Central Division. There you go.
So Dan, let me ask you really quickly too. So I think they're probably a trade piece away, and if they were to get like a Lauri Markkanen or something like that, then sure, I think all the lights come on in Dallas and Detroit rather. But is the addition of Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert, Jaden Ivey coming back enough for you and CL's argument to put Detroit into a contenders tier for you?
CL's argument was interesting because I think that we probably underrate how important it is that this team went to the playoffs and almost beat what turned out to be a conference finalist, and what they were able to do defensively, where I think if you look at their personnel, I mean, Cade got a lot better on defense last year, and you did have Asar Thompson, and Jalen Duren got a little bit better, but you didn't look at this team and say, oh, like they're going to be a really good defensive team, so that they were able to kind of punch above their weight a little bit there. I think my issue with them, and Warren kind of talked about, is like there needs to be another higher end player here. And I actually think that they were smart in not targeting that player over the offseason, because I think one of the things that teams get wrong the most is we've seen it a bunch. Like in the Atlanta Hawks, a team in this tier now, did it after they made the conference finals. You read too much into the success that you just had. And for the Pistons, progress for them won't necessarily be linear to me. They're going to want to develop Ron Holland. CL had mentioned Asar Thompson hasn't gotten like enough of an offensive opportunity yet. I think part of that is he missed a bunch of time, and then also there's functional limitations there. But you're going to need to explore the space with both of those guys, either on the ball or as shooters, because one of them needs to have some semblance of at least a standstill jump shot if you want your offense to operate, one, at peak capacity ever, but two, with both of them ever on the court together, which is also something we didn't see a ton of last year, is those two playing alongside of Jalen Duren. Can that happen? Should it happen? Jaden Ivey, coming back from a fairly major injury, and you also have him and Duren playing for their next contracts, maybe, if they don't get extensions. Do we buy into the sample we saw from Jaden Ivey when he hit his catch-and-shoot three-pointers? I think there are just too many questions about this team for me, and I actually think the fact that they seem willing to find the answers for them, to see what they have in all of the younger guys, where I think that they're going to prioritize playing Ron Holland over a Duncan Robinson, or maybe getting Asar Thompson reps as the primary ball handler over playing Karis LeVert. That might actually kneecap their wins in place in the East a little bit, and it will be, to me, in service of the bigger picture, which I think is smart. And that's why I can't get there with them right now unless they turn around and, like Warren had said, do they make a trade for a Lauri Markkanen or someone else that ambles their way onto the market?
All right, so we'll jump off the Pistons and jump to maybe some of the other teams and maybe the newcomers into this tier, and we'll start with maybe do a little bit more of a referendum on Atlanta and Orlando. So again, kind of on my stuff from the Atlanta side already. But I just feel like there's a certain level of continuity with a mix of new, they still have talent, like even Okongwu, who's, now going to be, I guess, probably the full-time starter, or at least getting a lot more minutes into that situation. Again, I cannot say how much of enough of a big of a Jalen Johnson fan I am, and Dyson Daniels more comfortable within that system as well too. I think they've done enough to warrant a pretty significant win increase that will have them knocking at the door. I still think they're probably third in the Eastern Conference, but it also depends how good Orlando ultimately is with the addition of Desmond Bane. Is where I'll actually kind of kick it over to you, Dan, now as well too. Orlando's addition of Desmond Bane, is that the elixir that puts the Magic over the hump that goes along with that great defensive identity they already have?
I think it says a lot that you can look at the Desmond Bane acquisition and say, oh, that's a perfect fit, and then still look at the roster and wonder if they have enough shooting. Adding him and Tyus Jones, I don't think is going to amount to enough shooting. The Franz Wagner jump shot experience is still not great. I think Paolo Banchero has a better outside touch in him, but I don't know if this team is fully there yet. They certainly belong in this tier to me relative to the rest of the East, and especially, you mentioned the defense that they have, but Jalen Suggs is always kind of dealing with something, it feels like, health-wise. They deal with front court injuries every single year. The defense is 11 of 10, no notes. I think when you get into questions about the offense, Tyus Jones finally gives you that floor organizer. How much is he going to play when we know Jamal Mosley doesn't really favor guys who don't play defense that hard, or not that hard, that well? So I think they're still kind of a player away, and it doesn't have to be a major rotation piece, but I don't think that their offense is going to get there just yet. And I think the other variable here, and it helps that Desmond Bane is so plug and play, but sometimes these major additions, they kind of take time, for the integration to work. And so just given how bad Orlando has been on offense for the past, basically 2 decades, but certainly with this core, I think that people are underrating the learning curve that will happen here. Their defense, though, will probably get them by. And so if everything kind of comes together by April, this would be a team you already don't want to face in the playoffs, but you might really not want to face in the playoffs at that time.
Listen, my sentiment is that if we say that the Orlando Magic are the third best team in the Eastern Conference, then that's why I feel as confident as I do about the Detroit Pistons kind of being in that conversation, or maybe even the Atlanta Hawks being in that conversation. I think it's a toss-up. I think it was a great move by the Orlando Magic to get Desmond Bane, no doubt. Because you're going to tell me that KCP, another year of KCP is what is going to be their answer? No way, right? But, and Shaw, you've been high on Tyus Jones. I think Tyus Jones is a comparable guard. Do I think that he's a starting guard? No. And I think that the Orlando Magic had something when they had Paolo Banchero operating as a point forward. Obviously, it was by default because they didn't have Jalen Suggs. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm more confident about Banchero as a point forward more so than I am about Jalen Suggs as being the point guard. You know what I'm saying? Now, that's not disrespecting Suggs, because maybe to me, he's a better player off the ball. Someone else is putting him in a better position for him, even though they've been trying to get him to be the point guard. But I think, to me, the key for the Orlando Magic is offensively, and maybe this is as simple-minded as me, is Banchero needs that solid number 2 guy that he can play off of. I know that they've been trying to do this with Wagner, but I believe that if it's going to be Banchero and Bane, we'll see how that plays out. And then you find a combination with Wagner in it, or you really have to lean in on Wagner stepping up, Banchero stepping up, and really being that dynamic duo, if that was the purpose and the intent, with the ancillary pieces around and those guys being better shooters. They can shoot the ball better because of what they're doing. But to do that, they have to dominate on the interior. They have to dominate the front court like it's nobody's business, to give the spacing that they need. That's the reason why I feel like it's a toss-up. Defensively, I think they're going to be fine, right? But Mosley, to me, is going to be the key on what he sees as to how he wants that team being led around on an offensively to make that all work. And I think that, to me, is going to be, quote unquote, the question mark of whether or not we're going to elevate them in the conversations of the Cleveland Cavaliers or the New York Knicks.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when you're talking about their offensive organization, they have a lot of guys who are secondary play creators, per se. Maybe it's not their mode of operation, so to speak, with the exception of Tyus Jones, right? That is what he's brought in essence to do. So how many minutes is he going to play? How many minutes is he going to be forced to play? Because maybe Suggs is out again too. Those are all the things that we want to try to. We'll have to see in terms of how it kind of counterbalances.
But I wouldn't be surprised. Sure, I wouldn't even be surprised if Jones takes Suggs' position.
you're wilding. There's not a chance.
I listen, I might be wilding, but I'm just saying, listen, Suggs has shown, remember, listen, this is the year before they were jostling between Cole Anthony and Suggs. They had they were waiting. And I'm just saying the Orlando Magic are in the middle of obviously being among one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They're not going to dilly-dally with the idea that they're going to get steady play from a guard in Tyus Jones, who's a veteran guard, that they'll lean in more if they have to sit Suggs or reposition him if the offense is going to look better with him on that floor. I believe in that because they can't afford not to do it with this kind of window that they have to actually be in the conversation of being an Eastern contender.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to even kind of like what Dan had said alluded to, where Mosley is going to want defensive guys out there. And Suggs is a difference maker defensive, but he impacts it. And it's not just statistically. He's stopping guys. He's tipping deflections. It's all the things that you want somebody to be disruptive. And then hopefully that would be able to create some secondary offense, off the turnovers, right? And getting maybe some fast break points as well, too. So, but either way, I think Orlando's positioned themselves to be within the running of this conversation. So I think we buried the lead maybe long enough in terms of talking about, again, the two teams that should clearly be, at least on paper, the class of the Eastern Conference when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. Dan, I want to kick it to you. Do you think the Knicks have done enough to improve their bench, right? They made more than a handful of moves in addition to, bringing Mike Brown in as a head coach, as somebody who you would presume is going to want to utilize that bench more anyway. Where do you see between the Knicks and the Cavaliers as whose Eastern Conference is it to lose, so to speak?
I think it's the Cavs' to lose to me. I think a lot of people are going to look at how the past three postseasons have ended for them, and fair enough, but they were really banged up. And I think last year was year one under Kenny Atkinson. We saw a ton of offensive growth, just looking at the movement that happened away from the ball and then the leap that Evan Mobley made. And to me, that might be the biggest difference between these two teams when you think about it. The Cavs are certainly deeper. Warren, you mentioned the Knicks' depth. The bench is definitely better, but I don't think people are counting enough for the variance you're going to see from guys like Yabusele. Yes, he was killing it with Real Madrid for half a decade. He's had one good NBA season, and we don't know how many minutes he's going to be able to play. You're looking at Jordan Clarkson is kind of towards the end of his career, and he was fine for Utah, but that's going to be someone, Knicks fans have seen it through the first two preseason games. He's going to take shots you don't want. They're trying to figure out a way to move one of their youngsters so they can sign both of Landry Shamet and Malcolm Brogdon. It's just, they're deeper, but I don't know if they're deep enough, especially if you're comparing them to the Cavs. I think really the biggest difference is Evan Mobley exists. And that is someone who he was second team All-NBA, I think. He won Defensive Player of the Year. I had him on my first team All-NBA. I thought he belonged in the top 5 or 6 of the MVP discussion. He's not even in his prime yet. And so we saw him shoot the ball better. We saw him put him on the floor, pass better, deal with physicality better. There are questions about the wings there now, and who's going to defend at the point of attack most consistently. There are questions there, but if you have someone who is already an all-star, an all-NBA player, and they're still getting better, it's kind of like Cade Cunningham in Detroit, except Cleveland has surrounded Evan Mobley with another all-NBA player in Donovan Mitchell, another all-NBA player in Darius Garland if he can remain healthy. I think that's the bigger difference to me, is that I think the Cavs at the top of their roster, their top guys are better collectively than the Knicks' top guys, where it's Jalen Brunson, and then it's, all right, who really is their second most important player? You're not dealing with that hierarchical tug of war in Cleveland to me as much, and if you are, it's almost in a good way. And then their bench is just deeper. Even, the Max Strus injury is kind of a bummer. And you also look at they have Sam Merrill, and now they have Lonzo Ball, and DeAndre Hunter's there. They have so many answers. And so I think going into the season, we can leave open the door for anything to happen, but I do think that the Cavs should be considered the favorites in the East for now.
Go ahead, take a seat.
Oh, man, look, let the Cavs cook. Let the Cavs cook. That's just what it comes down to. If I'm Kenny Atkinson, don't mess with the recipe, man. Let them cook. It would be one thing if when the Cavaliers brought Donovan Mitchell is like, I got to figure out a way to take this team to the promised land. And I think even he realizes this team goes where Evan Mobley goes, right? Night in, night out, Evan Mobley is and Shaw has been on Evan, that's his young son for I don't know how many years. He's been saying, watch for this kid. And we've been waiting. You know what I'm saying? It's finally come. And if Evan Mobley takes another leap, which he is completely capable of doing, the New York Knicks really don't have an answer for that version of what Evan Mobley brings you on that night in, night out basis, even in the playoffs. None of the teams in the Eastern Conference is going to be able to deal with what Evan Mobley is capable of bringing. And again, to your point, Dan, haven't even scratched the surface. He's not even in his prime. So all of that is that I'm saying is that when you even got guys around you that knows that they can play better, but at the end of the day, they all collectively can be in a space where they can dominate in each and every single facet, whether it's from the front court to the back court. The Cleveland Cavaliers have shown they have all of the pieces in place to do it. The point that I think you were making is, have they improved their bench? And they definitely have done that, barred that those guys stay healthy. And then I think the key here is Atkinson taking that step up. I believe that I'm in that class of elite coaches, knows how to coach this kind of talent and make this work. It's going to be a tough hill because as much as I want to buy into the New York Knicks being that kind of team, we still have those question marks about Karl Anthony Towns. We're still going to have those question marks about Mike Brown coaching in those type of situations and in those type of games. So at the end of the day, the New York Knicks are going to definitely be among one of the top two teams. Hey, they may even have the better regular season record of it. But to me, when I'm saying, okay, who do I think is probably going to walk out of the East? This is about as good as it gets, barring we see the evolution of Evan Mobley for the 25-26 season, because he, to me, is the key. He is the standout person I think everybody should watch for. And I think he may even wind up being one of the top three conversations for MVP because of what impact he's going to have for the Cavs.
I mean, that's super lofty, but I'll take the journey with you. I think Cleveland on paper makes a lot of sense. I'm also a prisoner of the moment in terms of them getting just railroaded by the Pacers last year. Like, to me, it has nothing to do with the regular season at this point anymore. It's like, what can they do really when it matters most? And there's a question, and I'm as a man, I don't want to question another man's heart, but as a team, I'd say, well, what happened? There was something didn't jive right for me last year when it came to that. And yes, they have a nagging injury, and Garland is already still dealing with a turf toe, and it's just like stuff like that gives me a lot of pause when it comes to wanting to push all my chips in on the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think they'll be a highly competent regular season team yet again, and should be one or two in the Eastern Conference, but it's about what they do in the playoffs here now. And Atkinson and Donovan Mitchell, like, they all know that. And then they know that Mobley needs to be kind of like the go-to guy. But I like what they did. Again, in Lonzo Ball, awesome. Great move as long as he can stay healthy. Even a fringe move like Larry Nance Jr. coming to this team. Again, that's awesome. Like, yeah, he's a competent dude who can help and assist in a lot of different ways. But to me, just what are they going to do when it really matters most? And I don't think they're going to catch anybody by surprise this year. Them running off and shooting the three the way they did, playing defense in the way they did even last year too. Like, I think they caught a lot of people flat-footed. Like, yo, this Cavs team is really like this buzzsaw. That won't happen again this year, despite even some of the improvements that they made and DeAndre Hunter having an opportunity to be there for the entirety of the season. I'm a little bit more down on them on their overall perspective, but recognize how much talent they have and who they should be in the Eastern Conference.
Interesting. I want to ask both of you guys a quick question. Do you think by them going out and winning the Emirates Cup that would give you confidence, like some level of confidence about how you want to see them? I mean, Dan, I know you have them favored, but I mean, do you think it's important for a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers or maybe even the New York Knicks? Do you think it's important for those teams to go out there, win the Emirates Cup? Or is it more important for teams like the Magic, the Hawks, or the Pistons to go out there and win that Emirates Cup as a, kind of like as a demarcation for how confident we want to see them, for the remainder of the regular season?
Yeah, I would think it's more important for like the Magic, Hawks, Pistons type team. I think Knicks fans would have PTSD if they're really going for the Emirates Cup in the middle of the season after seeing how Tom Thibodeau ran his squad. And with Cleveland, I think Warren just mentioned it, is that it's all kind of about what can they be in the postseason? Because I think overall they just have the bigger margin for error than maybe any team in the Eastern Conference. Like, you can take an all-star out of their lineup and they would probably still win 50-plus games next year. But how does that translate to the postseason? We're still waiting to see. So that's a team specifically that I would assume will manage itself to be optimal during the postseason. And the Knicks are in a similar fashion. And yeah, Mike Brown is new there. He kind of relied a lot on the top of his rotation before he left Sacramento, but he's coming to New York talking about running 10 deep. I think you guys have both mentioned the Pacers a couple times. The Pacers, the Thunder, even the Rockets a little bit. I think that they've really changed the way that teams view how they construct their rosters, is that 9, 10, even 11 deep is now of real NBA players is now the goal. And so I think teams like the Knicks and the Cavs, to where they're just all in. They might have outs and different things that they can still do, but they are so clearly all in on this season. I don't think it's as important for either of them to win the Emirates Cup.
Yeah, I would agree 1,000%, and like, it's not the barometer that I think we might have hoped it would have been, right, at any stage. Like, it just isn't. So, but those younger teams, like, that's like they're trying to air quote prove something, even not only to the world, but even to themselves, right? Can they compete at this playoff-like level in the middle of the season, in December or whatever the case may be? But Cleveland and New York know that it's about April and May for them, and that's where they should ultimately put all their hopes and dreams and aspirations when it comes to this upcoming NBA season.
All right, so I'm going to start with you, Shaw. What is your final thoughts? When it's all said and done, who do you think is going to represent the East for the 25-26 NBA season?
Yeah, I'd be a hypocrite if I, went otherwise right now. So I'm gonna go with the Knicks, and not because I'm excited about it. I think, but there's a lot of lived experience that they have by almost making it there last year. There is some depth that I think is going to be helpful to them. Obviously, everything is always injury dependent, but I think they are poised in essence to win the Eastern Conference this year. While I'm excited to see other teams compete, especially in this tier that we're talking about in terms of contenders, I got New York going to the NBA Finals. Dan, kick it over to you.
I have the Cavs going to the finals, but I would just keep an eye to reiterate on the Hawks. It just wouldn't surprise me if they're the team that comes out of the East this year when you look at the depth and the balance of their roster right now.
I like that, Dan. I like that's spicy, and I liked it. I'm gonna co-sign that.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, listen, I'm a prisoner of the moment. I'm going to go with the Cavs. I think they finally cracked the code, and they find themselves in the dance, much like the Indiana Pacers did. I don't know if it's going to be at the expense of the New York Knicks, but maybe I will take a little bit of joy in some of those high-profile Knicks fans that just keep gassing that team's head up and setting them up for disappointment. To me, I think Kenny Atkinson is due. Of the coaches that I want to so badly want, I would love to see Mike Brown put himself in the position to try and win it, man. Redeem himself for so many years of not being taken seriously, as a head coach. But I just think that Atkinson, he loves working with this group, man. I think it's 1 year too short. I wish Tibbs was still coaching, because then I probably would have been a little bit more confident about the Knicks' opportunity and chance this season. I think they may need an extra year.
All right. Well, I will not poo-poo that in any way, and I think Kenny Atkinson is already an elite level coach. Like, I mean, he's that guy right now. Just a matter of, again, can they do it when it matters most? So I think this has been an amazing conversation in the Eastern Conference, with the amazing Dan Favale. Dan, thank you so much. Tell people where they can find your stuff and anything you have upcoming before we let you ride out.
Well, first and foremost, thank you guys so much for having me. It was a blast kind of chopping it up with you about the East. And if anyone wants to find me, I would just advocate to check out the Hardwood Knocks NBA podcast if you don't have enough NBA podcasts in your life. We have a lot of fun over there, my co-host and I.
Oh yeah, they are the shiznit. I'm going old school with my my euphemisms.
My language now.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? They're great. Love the conversations that you guys do. And again, man, thank you for bringing that over, to our doorstep. I'm sure our listeners are always in favor of the people that we rock with. And Dan, we love rocking with you and your crew, bro.
Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. For everybody, man, listen, this is the East. Obviously, we've got the West, and then NBA season kicks off. But as always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. Special shout out to our man, Dan Favale from Hardwood Knocks. For the baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.